what's the point of my little analogy here? The point is that there's a definite reason why signs are posted outside of a city so that people who are traveling into the city can understand and get an idea of where they're going and how close they are to their destination. The signs indicate the proximity of whatever destination is in mind. Well, if Yeshua's return is that destination, it makes perfect sense that there would be signs preceding the coming. And yet, if we simply teach that his return is imminent without any signs, well, then why did he even give signs? It'd be like, again, going back to my analogy, you start driving away from city A, wherever that is, and you're driving towards city B, which is hundreds of miles away, you get off on your journey, you leave city A, it's behind you, it's far enough behind you that you can't see its city lights anymore, you're kind of now on the open road aspect, and then suddenly city B shows up as you're driving with no previous warning that there was any distance to travel anymore, that the city is getting closer, you don't see any city lights, nothing, just you're driving, and then suddenly, supernaturally, city B appears before you, and you're like, wow, that was kind of sudden. Well, that's almost like the way people say, well, Yeshua could come back at any moment before I finish the sentence. Well, then why did he even give us signs? So let's talk about these signs. We're going to finish this tonight, I believe. The disciples ask us, tell us when would these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age. And as we get down to verse 29, as I've been entertaining, just like Robert Van Kampen has, I believe that there are two signs. Let me read these verses, then I'll jump into Van Kampen's commentary. Under the heading of the glorious return in Matthew 24, starting at verse 29, we'll read 29, 30, and 31 from the NASB Bible here. But immediately after the tribulation of those days. What? Stop. That's one of the indicators right there. There's a sign. There's a chronology to that. After the tribulation of those days. Meaning, after Yeshua left, if the tribulation hadn't started yet, remember, Yeshua is going to leave after he is crucified, resurrected, and then he ascends to heaven. After he left, if there was what we might call immediacy of his return, or he can suddenly return at any moment without any sign, without any warning, then why would he even say immediately after the tribulation of those days? If the tribulation hadn't started yet, right? Yeshua ascended to heaven in the 30s, and yet if we're going to say that the tribulation was in the 70s, like I talked about earlier, well, then there's still like about 40 years from the 30s to the 70s between Yeshua's ascending to heaven and the tribulation, what some people think is the tribulation, like say the preterists who believe that the tribulation took place in the 70s. Well, there's still 30 years between that. And yet Yeshua says immediately after the tribulation of those days. And then he talks about these cosmic disturbances. Sun will be darkened, moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Notice verse 30, and then... there's a chronology marker there, and then a chronology marker from the previous verse. Immediately after, there's a chronology marker. Immediately after the tribulation, that's chronology. And then, verse 30, the sign, there's a sign, that nagging, stubborn sign that kind of disrupts the whole idea of Yeshua's immediacy, the idea that he could come in any moment without any warning. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then there's another chronology marker. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And then verse 31, and he will send forth his angels with the great trumpet blast, and they will gather together, select from the four winds, from the one end of the sky to the other. So right there in verse 30, he says, you'll see the Son of Man coming. So this is a return. Whether this is the rapture or the second coming, I'm not going to debate that at the moment. There will be a time in our schedule and the topics when we're going to focus only on rapture and second coming, but we're not doing that right now. For now, what I'm simply bringing to your attention is this concept of if Yeshua could come back at any moment, like the pre-tribbers teach, like we teach the immediate return, or Yeshua could come back, there's no sign that needs to precede. I wonder how they can sustain that argument given the chronological aspect of Yeshua's words, and the fact that the disciples ask, when will the sign of these things be? At the very least one sign, but perhaps two. And then Yeshua proceeds to answer their questions, giving the expectation that, yeah, there will be signs, right? Look at verse 30. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. So at the even if you take the preterist position, Yeshua couldn't have been expected to return at any moment. So, in other words, from the time that he left in the 30s to the time that the temple was destroyed in the 70s, or what preterists would consider to be the tribulation, there was still 40 years there. If the tribulation hadn't shown up, Yeshua couldn't return yet, because he says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation, which that's a time marker. If the tribulation hasn't taken place yet, then Yeshua's second return can't take place yet. At the very least, we can say that the second coming is contingent upon the tribulation happening, at least from these two verses, right? Am I reading something wrong here? You guys in the comment section are always happy to tell me where I'm wrong. This is a great time. Tell me where I'm missing something here. He says, after the tribulation of those days, then he describes a sign, which we're going to call the sixth seal, the sun, moon, and stars, that cosmic disturbance. And then he talks about the sign of the Son of Man appearing in the sky, which I believe is the supernatural brilliance that we're going to be talking about tonight, the glory of God, the glory of Yeshua, the glory of the Lord's appearing, the glory that shines like the lightning flashes from the east to the west. In fact, if I back up a few verses to verse 25, behold, I've told you in advance, right? There's that whole, I'm telling you in advance about certain things. And then verse 26, so if they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, do not go out, or behold, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe them. And look at verse 27, for as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. There's kind of this supernatural brilliance that he's alluding to with this analogy of lightning and the flashing and the quickness of the event, the certainty of the kind of widespread aspect, because lightning doesn't happen in an upper room where no one else sees it. It's a wide, bright flash that covers a large area of the sky that everyone can see, etc., etc.